The discovery in the shadows. The rain hammered against the rusted metal walls of Colony Station Nexus 7, creating a symphony of despair that echoed through the abandoned sectors. Captain Jake Morrison pulled his weathered coat tighter as he navigated through the debris-filled corridors of Level 12, the forgotten underbelly where society's unwanted were cast aside like broken machinery. Jake had been a soldier once, fighting in the galactic liberation wars against the hegemony. Now he was just another scavenger, picking through the remnants of civilization for anything worth trading. His cybernetic left arm whirred softly as he lifted a twisted piece of hull plating, searching for salvageable components underneath. The sound stopped him cold. It was barely audible over the rain, a soft whimpering that seemed almost human but carried an otherworldly quality. Jake froze, his enhanced hearing focusing on the source. There, behind a collapsed ventilation shaft, something moved in the night. Shadows. What he found made his stomach turn. Huddled in a makeshift cage of scrap metal and wire was a creature unlike anything in the standard galactic databases. She was humanoid, but clearly alien, with iridescent blue-green skin that seemed to shimmer even in the dim emergency lighting. Her large, amber eyes reflected the light like a nocturnal animal's, and delicate fin-like appendages emerged from behind her elongated ears. She was starving. Her ribs showed through her torn clothing, and her breathing was shallow and labored. Crude restraints marked her wrists where electronic shackles had been removed, leaving raw wounds that had begun to fester. Someone had dumped her here to die. Treating her like refuse. Jake knelt slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. The creature's eyes tracked him with intelligence and wariness. She understood she was being observed, but there was no hope left in her gaze, only resignation. "Hey there," Jake whispered, his voice barely audible over the storm. "I'm not going to hurt you." The creature tilted her head slightly, and Jake realized she was trying to understand his words. He reached into his pack and pulled out a protein bar, one of his last 3. Without hesitation, he tore open the wrapper and placed it near the cage opening. She stared at the food for a long moment, then at Jake's face, as if trying to determine whether this was another cruel game. When Jake backed away and sat against the opposite wall, she finally reached out with trembling fingers and took the offered sustenance. Jake watched her eat with the desperate efficiency of someone who had learned that every meal might be there. Last, as she consumed the protein bar, color began to return to her skin, and her breathing became more stable. When she finished, she looked directly at him and spoke a single word in accented but clear standard galactic. "Thank you." The simple phrase hit Jake like a physical blow. This wasn't just an intelligent creature. She was a person. Someone with thoughts, feelings, and the capacity for gratitude. Someone who had been treated as less than garbage by whoever had left her here to die. Jake studied the crude cage. The lock was electronic but old, the kind used by slavers and illegal research facilities. He had seen similar devices during the war, used to contain prisoners and experimental subjects. His jaw tightened as he realized what she likely was. A survivor of some horrific program that had been shut down or abandoned. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She hesitated, her amber eyes searching his face for any sign of deception. Finally she spoke. "Zara. My name is Zara." Jake nodded and introduced himself. Then he began working on the cage lock with tools from his pack. The mechanism was corroded and damaged, but his cybernetic arm provided the precision needed to bypass. The failing circuits as the lock clicked open. Zara didn't immediately move. She looked at Jake with an expression of wonder and disbelief. "Why?" she asked. Simply. Jake met her gaze steadily. "Because everyone deserves a chance to live with dignity. And because someone needs to prove that not all humans are monsters." Building trust in a broken world, the abandoned maintenance tunnel Jake led Zara through stretched for nearly a kilometer beneath the station's main levels. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the walls as they moved carefully through the debris-strewn passage. Zara walked close behind him, her bare feet making almost no sound on the metal grating. Jake's makeshift shelter occupied a forgotten storage bay in Section J7, hidden behind a false wall he had constructed from salvaged materials. It wasn't much, just a 20-square-meter space with basic amenities powered by a jury-rigged fusion cell. But it was clean and secure. As they entered, Zara's eyes widened at the sight of actual furniture, clean water, and food supplies. Jake gestured toward a small alcove where he had set up a basic medical station. "Let me look at those wounds," he said, indicating the infected marks on her wrists. Zara instinctively pulled back, her body tensing. The motion was subtle, but telling. She had learned to associate medical procedures with pain and degradation. Jake immediately stopped and raised his hands peacefully. "I understand," he said softly. "You've been hurt by people who claimed they were helping. But those injuries will get worse if we don't treat them." He moved to his supply cabinet and pulled out a portable medical scanner, showing it to her. "This won't hurt. It just reads biological signatures to determine what kind of treatment you need." Zara studied the device, then Jake's face. Something in his expression, perhaps the complete absence of the clinical detachment she had learned to fear, made her nod slowly. The scanner revealed that Zara's physiology was indeed alien, but remarkably compatible with human medical treatments. Her species, which she identified as Aquarian, had evolved on an ocean world and required a higher level of hydration than humans. The wounds on her wrists were infected with bacteria that responded well to standard antibiotics. As Jake carefully cleaned and bandaged her injuries, Zara began to speak. Her words came haltingly at first, then in a rush as if a dam had burst. She had been captured during a hegemony raid on her homeworld 3 years ago. Her people were known for their empathic abilities and their skill in biotechnology, making them valuable as both research subjects and forced laborers. She had been sold to a private research facility that conducted illegal experiments on alien physiology. They wanted to understand how our empathic abilities worked, she explained, her voice growing stronger as Jake worked. They thought they could replicate it artificially, create enhanced soldiers who could read enemy emotions. The facility had been shut down 6 months ago when Galactic Council inspectors finally tracked it down. But rather than properly relocate the test subjects, the administrators had simply abandoned the facility, leaving dozens of aliens to die in their cells. Zara had escaped during the chaos, but had been recaptured by scavengers who saw her as valuable merchandise. When she proved too sick and traumatized to be profitable, they had dumped her in the abandoned sector where Jake found her. Jake listened without interruption, his anger growing with each detail of her ordeal. When she finished, he was quiet for several minutes, processing what she had told him. "The people who did this to you," he finally said, "they don't represent humanity. Most humans would be as horrified by your treatment as I am." Zara looked at him skeptically. Then why did no one help? Why did they all look away? Jake had no easy answer for that. He had seen too much during the war to believe in the inherent goodness of any species, including his own. But he had also seen extraordinary acts of courage and compassion from the most unlikely sources. "Because it's easier to ignore suffering than to confront it," he said honestly. "But that doesn't make it right. And it doesn't mean everyone will make that choice." Over the following days, Jake worked to nurse Zara back to health. He shared his food without complaint, even though it meant reducing his own rations. He gave her his only set of clean clothes and slept on the floor so she could have the bed. More importantly, he treated her with consistent kindness and respect. He asked permission before entering her space, knocked before opening doors, and never touched her without explicit consent. These small gestures meant everything to someone whose autonomy had been completely stripped away. Zara's natural empathic abilities allowed her to sense Jake's genuine intentions. She could feel his compassion, his protective instincts, and his growing determination to help her build a new life. It was the first time in years that she had encountered emotions directed toward her that weren't tainted with greed, curiosity, or cruelty. As her strength returned, Zara began to reveal other aspects of her nature. Her empathic abilities were indeed remarkable, allowing her to sense emotional states and even influence them to a limited degree. More practically, her people's biotechnology skills meant she could identify medicinal plants and create healing compounds from organic materials. Jake realized that Zara wasn't just a victim he was helping. She was a person with valuable skills and knowledge who could contribute meaningfully to their survival. This revelation seemed to surprise Zara herself, who had begun to internalize the dehumanization she had experienced. On the seventh day, as they shared a simple meal of synthesized protein and hydroponic vegetables, Zara looked directly at Jake and smiled for the first time since he had found her. "I think I'm beginning to remember who I was before," she said quietly. Jake smiled back. "Good, because the galaxy needs people like you in it." The hunt begins. The trouble started with a routine supply run to the station's main market level. Jake had taken every precaution, providing Zara with a hooded cloak that concealed her distinctive features and coaching her on human mannerisms. They needed food and medical supplies, and his savings were running dangerously low. The market bustled with the usual mix of traders, scavengers, and station personnel. Jake moved through the crowd with practiced ease, making his purchases quickly and efficiently. Zara stayed close, her head down, following his lead perfectly. They were almost back to the service tunnels when Jake spotted them. 3 figures in matching gray uniforms moved through the crowd with purposeful strides, scanning faces with handheld devices. Bounty hunters or corporate security. Either way, they were looking for someone specific. Jake's blood ran cold when he saw one of them pause and check a holographic display. Even from a distance, he could see the image clearly. It was Zara. "Move," he whispered urgently, guiding her toward the nearest exit. But it was too late. One of the hunters had spotted them and was speaking rapidly into a communication device. Jake's military training kicked in as he assessed their options. The main corridors would be blocked within minutes. Their only chance was to reach the maintenance levels before the hunters could coordinate their search pattern. They ran through a maze of service passages, Jake leading the way through routes he had memorized during months of scavenging. Behind them, the sound of pursuit grew louder, heavy boots on metal grating, the electronic chatter of tactical communications, the whir of scanning equipment. "Why are they after me?" Zara gasped as they paused at a junction. Jake checked his handheld scanner for signs of pursuit. "Someone put a bounty on you. Maybe your original captors. Maybe someone who wants to restart the research program." They reached Jake's shelter, only to find it had been discovered and ransacked. His carefully constructed hiding place was torn apart, his supplies scattered and destroyed. A message display on the wall showed a corporate logo Jake recognized: Hegemony Biotechnology, one of the mega corporations that had operated outside galactic law during the war. They never stopped looking for you, Jake realized. You weren't just a test subject. You were valuable intellectual property. Zara's empathic abilities were overwhelmed by the emotional chaos around her. She could sense Jake's growing protectiveness, mixed with tactical calculation, but underneath it all was something that surprised her: excitement. He wasn't just helping her escape. He was enjoying the challenge. They gathered what salvageable supplies they could and moved deeper into the station's forgotten areas. Jake knew places that didn't appear on any official schematics, spaces created by hasty construction and later sealed off. They could hide there temporarily, but eventually they would need a more permanent solution out as they settled into a new temporary shelter. Zara shared more details about her abilities and background. Her empathic gifts were accompanied by a form of biological interface capability. She could communicate directly with certain types of organic technology and even influence biological systems to some degree. That's why they wanted me, she explained. My people developed biotechnology that could interface with human neural systems. They thought they could use me to create enhanced soldiers, beings who could control technology with their thoughts and influence enemy emotions. Jake understood now why the corporation was so determined to recapture her. In the wrong hands, her abilities could be weaponized in ways that would shift the balance of power in the galaxy. We can't run forever, he said, studying a schematic of the station's layout. They have resources we don't, and they'll eventually corner us. Zara looked at him with growing concern. What are you thinking? Jake's smile was predatory. During the war, he had been more than just a soldier. He had been part of an elite unit that specialized in behind enemy lines operations. He knew how to turn the hunted into the hunter. I'm thinking it's time to remind these corporate thugs why humanity earned its reputation as the galaxy's most dangerous species when cornered. He began outlining a plan that would require them to move through the station's most dangerous areas, places where even corporate security teams would hesitate to follow. But Jake had advantages they didn't expect: knowledge of the station's hidden areas, military training, and most importantly, a highly motivated alien ally whose abilities they had underestimated. Zara listened to his plan with growing amazement. Where she saw impossible odds and certain death, Jake saw tactical opportunities and creative solutions. His confidence was infectious, and for the first time since her capture years ago, she began to believe that escape was possible. You're insane, she said when he finished explaining. Jake grinned. That's what makes us human. We do impossible things because no one told us they were impossible. As night cycle approached on the station, Jake began his preparations. He had weapons hidden in various caches throughout the lower levels, equipment salvaged from his military days that he had never expected to use again. But his most powerful weapon wasn't technological. It was his absolute determination to protect someone who had become more than just a rescue mission. Zara had become someone he cared about, and Jake Morrison had never failed someone he cared about. The hunt was about to become a war. The counterattack, Jake's first strike, came at 0300 station time, when the corporate security teams were transitioning shifts. He had spent hours studying their patrol patterns, noting their equipment loadouts, and identifying their command structure. The leader was a man named Director Voss, a former military officer turned corporate enforcer who had been personally overseeing the search. The attack was surgical in its precision. Jake used the station's own security systems against the hunters, triggering false alarms in sections far from their actual location, while simultaneously overloading power grids in areas where the security teams were positioned. In the confusion, he struck. The first team was neutralized with non-lethal nerve gas, a military-grade compound Jake had synthesized from medical supplies and industrial chemicals. The second team found their communication equipment disabled by an electromagnetic pulse device Jake had constructed from salvaged ship components. But Jake's most effective weapon was Zara herself. Her empathic abilities, when properly focused, could create intense psychological discomfort in hostile individuals. She couldn't control minds, but she could project feelings of unease, paranoia, and disorientation that made the hunters question their own perceptions. I can sense their emotional states, Zara reported as they moved through the maintenance tunnels. The leader is becoming increasingly frustrated. He's starting to doubt his team's competence. Jake smiled grimly. Good. Frustrated people make mistakes. Their next target was the Hunter's base of operations, a commandeered security office on level 8. Jake and Zara approached through the ventilation system, a route that required Zara to use her natural flexibility to navigate spaces too narrow for human movement. Inside the office, Director Voss was arguing with his subordinates over their failure to locate the targets. Jake watched through a maintenance grate as the man paced back and forth, his anger evident in every gesture. "Sir," one of the hunters reported, "we've lost contact with teams 2 and 5. Their last known positions were—" The lights went out. Jake had triggered another power grid failure, but this time he and Zara were inside the affected area. In the darkness, Zara's empathic abilities became even more potent. She projected waves of confusion and fear, turning the hunters' enhanced night vision equipment into a liability as they began seeing threats that weren't there. Yet Jake dropped through the ceiling vent like a ghost, his cybernetic arm providing enhanced strength as he systematically disabled the hunters' weapons and communication equipment. In less than 30 seconds, he had rendered an entire team of professional soldiers helpless without firing a single shot. When the emergency lighting activated, Director Voss found himself alone in the room with Jake, who sat casually in the Atka. "Man's own chair. Director Voss," Jake said conversationally. "We need to talk." Voss reached for his sidearm, but Jake's cybernetic reflexes were faster. The weapon was in Jake's hand before Voss could clear his holster. "I wouldn't," Jake advised. "I've been very careful not to permanently harm any of your people so far, but my patience has limits." Zara emerged from the ventilation system, moving with fluid grace despite the confined space. Voss's eyes widened as he saw her clearly for the first time. "The Aquarian subject," he breathed. "Do you have any idea what she's worth?" Jake's expression hardened. "She's not a subject. She's not property. She's a person." "She's a strategic resource," Voss countered. "Her abilities could revolutionize military technology. The applications are limitless. Which is exactly why she needs to be free to make her own choices about how those abilities are used," Jake replied. Zara stepped forward, and Voss involuntarily stepped back. Her empathic projection was focused directly on him now, and Jake could see the effect in the man's growing discomfort. "You feel it, don't you?" Zara said softly. "The fear, the uncertainty. That's just a fraction of what I experienced during your experiments. Now imagine living with that feeling every day for 3 years." Voss was sweating now, his corporate confidence cracking under the weight of artificially enhanced emotion. "Stop it," he demanded. "Make it stop." "I'm not doing anything to you," Zara replied. "I'm simply allowing you to experience the emotional resonance of your own actions. This is what your victims felt." Jake accessed the office's computer system using Voss's security credentials. Within minutes, he had downloaded complete files on the bounty operation, including the identities of everyone involved and the location of Hegemony Biotechnology's illegal research facilities. "Here's what's going to happen," Jake announced. "You're going to call off the hunt. You're going to report to your corporate masters that the subject died during the operation, and you're going to delete every trace of her existence from your databases." Voss shook his head desperately. "I can't do that. The board will have me executed for failure." Jake leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Then you'd better hope they never find out what really happened here. Because if they send another team after her, I will personally ensure that your failure becomes very public knowledge." To emphasize his point, Jake activated a recording device. This contains complete documentation of Hegemony Biotechnology's illegal research programs, including evidence of war crimes and violations of sapient rights. It's currently uploaded to 17 different data havens across the galaxy, set to automatically release if anything happens to either Zara or myself. The director's face went pale as he realized the implications. Corporate executives might tolerate failure, but they would never forgive exposure of their illegal activities. "You're bluffing," Voss said weakly. Jake's smile was cold. "Try me." 4. Several long minutes, the only sound in the room was the hum of station machinery. Finally, Voss activated his communication device. "All teams, this is Director Voss. Operation terminated. The subject is confirmed deceased. Begin extraction procedures immediately." As the corporate security teams began withdrawing from the station, Jake and Zara prepared for the next phase of their plan. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. A new beginning among the stars 6 months later. Jake and Zara stood on the observation deck of the independent trading vessel New Horizon, watching as the blue-green marble of Aquaris Prime grew larger in the viewport. It had taken them a year of careful travel through neutral space to reach Zara's homeworld, but the journey had been worth every challenging moment. The corporate bounty hunters had indeed called off their search, convinced by Jake's evidence and Zara's demonstration of her abilities that pursuing her further would be more costly than profitable. But Jake knew that safety was always temporary when dealing with entities that saw people as resources. Zara had changed dramatically during their journey together. The frightened, broken being Jake had found in that cage had been replaced by a confident woman who had reclaimed her identity and purpose. Her empathic abilities had grown stronger with practice, and she had begun developing new applications for her biotechnology skills. "I never thought I would see home again," Zara said softly, her hand finding Jake's as they watched her world approach. Jake squeezed her fingers gently. "Your people will be glad to have you back." But Zara shook her head. "It won't be the same. I'm not the same person who was taken 3 years ago. The experiences I've had, the things I've learned, I can't pretend they didn't happen." Jake understood. He had struggled with his own demons after the war, trying to reconcile the person he had been with the person he had become. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe you're exactly who the galaxy needs you to be. The reunion with Zara's family was emotional and complex. Her parents had mourned her as dead, and her younger brother barely remembered her. But her people were remarkably adaptable, and their natural empathic abilities allowed them to understand what she had endured without requiring detailed explanations. More importantly, Zara's experiences had given her unique insights into the galaxy beyond their ocean world. She brought knowledge of human technology, corporate politics, and the broader interstellar situation that proved valuable to Aquarian leaders who were considering their world's role in galactic affairs. Jake found himself welcomed as a hero by the Aquarian people, who honored him as the human who had restored their daughter to them. But he was most proud of a simple ceremony where Zara's family formally adopted him as a clan brother, acknowledging his role not just as her rescuer, but as her chosen family. The real test came when representatives from various galactic organizations arrived on Aquaris Prime, seeking to negotiate agreements with the Aquarian government. Jake watched with pride as Zara took her place as a cultural liaison, using her unique perspective to help her people navigate the complex world of interstellar diplomacy. Her approach was revolutionary. Instead of simply trying to protect Aquarian interests, she advocated for the rights of all non-human species who had been exploited by corporate and military entities. She proposed the creation of an independent monitoring organization that would investigate violations of sapient rights and provide protection for vulnerable populations. "Someone needs to speak for those who have no voice," Zara explained to the galactic representatives. "Someone needs to ensure that what happened to me doesn't happen to others." Jake couldn't help but smile as he watched her command the room with quiet authority. The broken victim he had found in that cage had become a force for positive change in the galaxy. When the formal negotiations concluded, Jake and Zara walked along the crystal beaches of her homeworld, discussing their future plans. The new Horizon was scheduled to depart in 3 days, and Jake had been offered passage to any destination he chose. "You could stay," Zara suggested. "My people would be honored to have you as a permanent resident." Jake considered the offer seriously. Aquarius Prime was beautiful, peaceful, and safe. Everything he had thought he wanted after years of conflict and struggle. But something inside him resisted the idea of permanent retirement. "There are others out there," he said finally. "People. In cages. People who've been forgotten or discarded. Maybe it's time to do something about that." Zara's smile was radiant. "I was hoping you would say that." Over the following weeks, they developed a plan that would combine Jake's tactical expertise with Zara's diplomatic skills and empathic abilities. They would create an independent rescue and rehabilitation organization, funded by sympathetic governments and private donors, dedicated to helping victims of corporate exploitation and illegal research. The organization would operate from a converted cruiser, equipped with medical facilities, residential quarters, and defensive systems. They would work with local authorities when possible, but were prepared to operate independently when necessary. Their first official mission came from an unexpected source. Director Voss, the corporate security chief who had hunted them, sent a coded message through back channels. He had been quietly documenting evidence of Hegemony Biotechnology's ongoing operations, and he had located another research facility holding alien test subjects. Why would he help us? Jake wondered as they reviewed Voss's intelligence. Zara's empathic insights provided the answer. Guilt, shame, a desire for redemption. He's seen too much to continue pretending it's justified. Jake grinned as he began, planning their first official rescue operation. Then let's give him that chance for redemption. As the New Horizon prepared to depart Aquarius Prime, Jake and Zara stood once again on the observation deck. But this time, they weren't looking at a destination. They were looking toward the stars themselves, toward the infinite possibilities that awaited them. Ready for another adventure? Jake asked. Zara's answer came without hesitation. Ready to change the galaxy. Together, they had proven that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe isn't advanced technology or superior firepower. It's the simple decision to treat others with dignity and compassion. And they were just getting started.